Hey, welcome back. My name is James Johnson, and my expertise lies in retirement and estate planning. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about indexed universal life as an asset class. Now, for most people, they're going to think, what are you talking about? Life insurance is an asset class. Well, if everything you thought to be true turned out to not be true, how soon would you want to know? So I'm going to give you some very interesting facts today, and we'll see how this works out for you. Now, you've probably seen it on TV, from the talking heads or on YouTube or all over the internet. It has high fees, it has hidden costs, rates of return are low, I can't access my money if I need it, blah, 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 blah. Now, although much of that stuff is true, much of it's not true. And if you do it right and you know what you're doing, you can do incredible things using life insurance. So the question I have for you is, which direction are the markets going? Are they going up? Are they going down? Is it a bull market? Is it a bear market? Where is it going? Well, I can tell you this. I can tell you exactly what the stock market's going to do for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. And there's going to be bears and there's going to be bulls. And quite frankly, I don't care. I just want to know that it's going to go up and it's going to go down. If I look at the market and I look at it over history, and let's start here in 2018 to 1926, all right, we can see that the average bull market period lasted 9.1 years with an average cumulative total of 473%. The average bear market period averaged 1.4 years with an average cumulative loss of minus 41%. So you can see throughout time, the market goes up and the market goes down, and it does that very consistently throughout history. The market's in compound interest. Well, if I started out here with $1 million and I put that in as my original contribution, and I invested it here and I made 6% interest on that $1 million for 1 year, and everybody's going, well, how do you make 6%? That's really not that hard, and that's what I'm going to show you here in these few coming slides. So if I made 6% on that, that would mean that the first year I would make $60,000. At the end of the year, I would have $1,060,000. The second year, I would make an additional 6%, which would be $63,600, and I would go up to $1,123,600. Now, if I followed this out to the 10th year, you'd see I'd be at $1,689,480. And the interest credited in that 10th year would be $101,369 interest credited. Now, that's an effective yield on my original investment of 10.13%. So my effective yield interest in that year is $101,000 on my $1 million, works out to 10.13%. Now, if I push the clock forward out to the 20-year mark, I would be at $3,025,603. My interest credited would be $181,536, and based on my original investment, I would be yielding 18.15% based on my original investment. So you would look at all that and then you would say something like, well, but I've got to pay taxes on this. How am I going to grow this tax free? Well, also I want to know, how can I protect the principal and all of the gains from the downs of the market? I don't want to just grow it tax-free. I want to protect itself from the downs of the market, and then I want to get an average annual rate of return of that 6%. So moving forward, if I take a look at how often in the 1930s through the 50s decades did the S&P increase in value? Well, you can see in the 30s, which was a terrible period of time in the market, the S&P only went up by 40% of the time. And in the 40s, it went up by 70% of the time. And in the 50s, it went up by 80% of the time. And these were the actual calendar year market returns for the S&P 500 over that period of time. So 100% of the up years were up by more than 10% in the 30s. I'm sorry, let's go back here really quick. And 71% of the up years were up by more than 10% in the 40s, and 88% were up by more than 10% in the 50s. So during the 60s and 70s, 70% up in the 60s, 70% up in the 70s. In the 80s, we were more than 90% of the time we were up. We had one down year in all the years of the 80s. And in the 90s, we repeated the process with only one down year. And when the S&P increased in value, what percentage of those years did the S&P grow by? At least 10%. Well, 86% of the time in the 60s, it was up by more than 10%. 71% of the time, it was up by more than 10%. 78% of the time, it was up by more than 10%. 78% of the time, it was up by more than 10%. So how often in the year 2000 was it up? Well, remember, 2000 was the closest thing that we had to the 30s, where we had 3 down years in a row, plus another really bad year down in 2008. And what we can see here is we were up 60% of the time, but 67% of that time, we were up by more than 10%. So let's look at this over that period of time. So what percentage of the years in each decade since the Great Depression has the S&P increased in value? There have been 8 decades since the S&P Great Depression. 40% of the years in the 30s, 70 in the 40s, 80 in the 50s, 70 in the 60s, 70s in the 70s, 90% in the 80s, 90 in the 90s, 60% in 2000, and 90% in 2001 or 2010 through 2021. So look at that over time. So if we look at an S&P bell curve, we can see here that on the left we have the down years and what percentage they were down, not the exact percentage, but in 10% increments. And on the right in the blue, we have 10% up, 20% up, 30% up, etc. And you can see that only twice in history has the market been up by more than 60% over in the S&P, that is. And only twice in history on the S&P has it been up by over 50%. And then we have a varied there. On the downside, we can see that only one time in history has it been down by 50%. And then 2 times down by 40%, and 3 times down by 30%. We have 5 times down by 20%. And then we have several of them there down by up to 10%. If we look at that over that period of time here, you can see that only 1.1% of the time was it down by 50%. And on the right side, conversely, only 2.2% of the time was it up by more than 60%. So the S&P has been up 74% of the last 90 years. That's pretty good. But you're going to say something like, well, past is no indication of the future. Yet it's when you forget your past that you're really in trouble. Because although no one can say what the future is going to do, we can look to the past to see what's happened over time. And there's no real pattern to it. But what we do know is that the market will go up and the market will go down, regardless of how we look at it. So what are the down years? What if you could get it so that the down years had no effect on your principal or your gain? In other words, when the market went down, you made 0. Would that be good? How would you have liked to have made 0 in the year 2022, the year 2008, 2001, 2, and 2000? That would have been a fantastic year rather than taking the losses that we took during that time. How much better would you sleep at night if you knew that the worst thing that could happen to you is you made 0 when the market went down? Well, the percentage of years that the S&P was up was 74, 80, and 75%, and 80%. So 74% since the year 1930, 80% over the last 30 years, 75% over the last 20 years, and 80% over the last 10 years. When the S&P was up, what percentage of those up years did the S&P grow by at least 10%? The last 30 years rather, 72%, 20 years, 73%, and 10 years, 87% of the time, it was more than 10% up. So we'll take a look here at a chart at you can see on the left here, you have up years, down years, percentage of up years, percentage of down years, the number of consecutive years it was either up or down, as in 2 or more, or 2 or less, and then 3 or less, and 3 or more, 4 and 4. And then you can see the periods of time again. So we go out over here and we look at over that period of time and we look over the last 70 years. And we can see that over the last 70 years, 55 years of the time it was up. 15 years of the time it was down. And that was 79% of the time it was up and 21% of the time it was down. The consecutive years that the market was up or down by 2 years, or 2 years up or down, was 42 years on the upside and 3 years on the downside. 3 years down, it happened one time in 70 years, and 4 years down, it's never happened. And so what I like to tell people is that if we're going to see the stock market go down for 4 years in a row, then what you really need is guns and bullets, because the whole system is falling apart at that point and we have a real problem. So the Great Depression decade, 1930 through 1939, an index strategy versus a riding the market. So what is an index strategy? Well, an index strategy is where we get some of the gains of the market up to a cap, but we don't participate in the losses. Now, what we're not going to get into this video is how indexing works and how there's caps and spreads and participation rates. At the end of all of this, I'm going to show you how you can go out and get a course on life insurance itself and learn how life insurance really works and all of the ins and outs of all of these indexes and all that good stuff. But let's just follow this a little bit here. So in the 30s, if we had put $1 million in the market in 1929, in 1930, we would have lost 33% of that money. We would have been down to $662,000. 31, we would have lost 52%. 32, we'd have lost another 23%. Well, this is when we thought it was over. And then we'd be down to $241,000. And then we turn around in 1933 and we'd make 66.69%. And it would be the greatest time ever. We'd think, wow, we're just killing it. But we only got back to $401,000. We lost another 4.14, and by the time that decade was over, we ended up with 604,000, which is basically 40% less, 39.6% less than what we actually had when we started. Whereas if we'd have put indexing to that and we would have had a zero floor, so when the market was down, we lose 0, and when the market was up, we only made 9%, then what we would find here is that we would end up with 47% gain in there. So we'd end up with $1.47 million. So we started with $1 million over here. We had 3 down years right here. Market went down, down, down. We're at $241,000. And we end with $604,000 at the end of that decade. Yet, over on the right over here, we started with the same $1 million. And when the market went down, we made 0, we lost 0. We had a 9% floor, meaning we couldn't make more than 9%. And we ended with $1.4 million. That's a pretty sizable difference in that period of time. As a matter of fact, it's not a change of $470,000. It's a change of $870,000 over that period of time. I don't know. What do you think? Which one would you rather do? Would you rather do the strategy on the left or the strategy on the right? And you can see here in the year where you made 66.69%, you only made 9% on the right. So would you take 9% when you could be making 66%? And I will tell you that it is more important to avoid the losses than it is to pick the winners. So riding the S&P with dividends versus index strategies with a floor of 0% and a growth ceiling of 9% during the next really bad period of time, which was 2000 through 2009, you would see that during that period of time, you lost 9.1, 11.89, 22%. Most people were down by at least 40% in the year 2000, 2001, and 2002. While all that time, I was making zero. I was losing zero, I was making zero. Now, they came back and they made 28% in the year 2002, yet I made 9% during that period of time. So I started with $1 million over here, and whenever the market's going up, I'm riding the up of the market, but whenever the market's going down, I'm not participating. Their effective yield between 2000 and 2009 was minus 9.12%. So they invested $1 million, and over that 9-year period of time, actually 10-year period of time, they lost money. They actually ended up with $908,832. They did not even keep up with inflation. Where I, with a 9% cap, and caps are much higher than that these days, I ended up with $1,505,114. Now, did I tell you that I also did that tax-free? Did I tell you that I also had access to my money anytime I wanted it? And if I accessed it, I could actually put it back? Did I tell you that if I died, it turns into much more than that, tax-free to my heirs? Nah, haven't mentioned any of that stuff yet. I'm just showing you what would happen if you were to use some kind of protection and make some of your money safe. Now, I'm not telling you to take all your money and do this, but I am telling you there's a lot of legitimacy in this concept and doing it. And many, many people use it and use it successfully. So I had a 59.6% difference over that period of time of $596,000, and all I did was avoid the losses. Got small rates of return, but I avoided the losses. And I will take a 9% return cap over a 66% gain or a 28% gain or a 15% gain any day of the week. Because if I don't participate with those losses, I come out far, far ahead. Now, you probably know this guy. His name is Tony Robbins, right? And he wrote a book. It's called Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy that you can use too. And I'll surmise this for you, just some of the things that he said inside the book. He said that you could use this investment for unlimited deposit amounts with no income limitations. No tax on growth of your account. No taxes when access is structured correctly. There's a really key point. If structured correctly. Very few people know how to do this and do it right. Lots of people do it, but very few people do it right. Any money left over for your heirs cannot be taxed. Never again will you pay tax on the growth of your account, of your money, when you access it within this structure. Basically, it's a tax-free zone. It's viewed as an insider secret for the affluent, a legal way to invest all without paying taxes on gains. New York Times, February 9th, 2011. In the early 2014, the Guinness Book of World Records announced that a new world record had been established. No, it wasn't for the tallest man in the world or for the world's longest fingernails, which is really funny because I actually used to be a manufacturer in the beauty business and I've seen the world's longest fingernails, but it was a record that was largely went unnoticed. Could you guess what it is? A mysterious billionaire buys record-breaking $201 million in a life insurance policy. Okay, you got to ask yourself a question. Why would a billionaire be buying $201 million in life insurance? Must be something good to it. Not sure what it is. So let's talk about your bank. All right, I'm going to use Wells Fargo here. And by the way, this is all public information. You could go out to FDIC.org and look up all of this information. It's out there, okay? But we're talking about life insurance as an asset class. Permanent life insurance could play a unique role in managing and reducing the overall returns of risk to the investment portfolio due to the uncorrelated nature of death benefit compared to other types of investments and potential provide an additional source of retirement income. We have fixed and indexed returns. We have favorable tax treatment. We have tax-free access to the cash with plenty of product options, income tax-free payments. It avoids probate. It's easily divisible, and it anchors a portfolio. I like to say, if you could grow your money tax-free, access up to 85% at any time tax-free, put it back if you want, get most of the gains of the market, never participate in the losses, and when you died, it passed on at a multiple of, say, 2 to 3 times that amount, would you want to do that? And how much money would you put there? Well, for me, I'm going to put as much there as they'll allow me to do. But what's interesting is this Wells Fargo here. You can look here on Wells Fargo's pie chart about how they have their money, or should I say your money, invested. And you can see that they have 15% of their portfolio in life insurance. And you'd say, no way, that's not possible. Well, I got news for you, folks. It is possible. And not only is it possible, it's true. These numbers that you see here are in billions of dollars. And this is actually their balance sheet as of 2020. You can see here that on their bank premises and fixed assets, they have $11 billion. Over here under life insurance assets on line 41, they have $19 billion in life insurance. So they have more in life insurance wrapped up in insurance companies than they have wrapped up in fixed assets. That ought to make your head spin around a couple times. So, and whose money is that? That's your money. You see, the only money that banks have is the money that the depositors put in there, plus what the government leverages them up with, and then they take it and they loan it all out in different ways and fashions. So if they're not out loaning money out, they're out of business. So you can see on line 42, their general account life insurance assets, $5 billion, separate account life insurance assets, $13 billion, and hybrid insurance assets, $630 million. Well, let's look at Bank of America. We can see here on Bank of America that their fixed assets are $19 billion. And on life insurance assets, it's $22 billion. What do they know that we don't know? I got to ask you, if the banks are taking your money and putting it there, don't you think it might be something you want to do as well? Cash value life insurance makes Harborough College football's top paid coach. Cash value life insurance makes Harborough College football's top paid coach because this type of deferred compensation alternative appeals to talented leaders and executives. Now, you could go out here and go read this whole article out there at that website right there. But what you would find is that they give him millions of dollars in insurance loans to fund a maximum funded policy over that period of time. In addition to his $5 million salary, They loaned him $4 million in 2016 and an additional $2 million for the following 5 years to build a maximum funded policy. Now, why do you suppose he did that? And he did that so he could grow his money tax-free, access up to 85% of it at any time tax-free, put it back if you want, get most of the gains of the market, never participate in losses, and when you die, it passes on at a multiple of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that amount, depending upon your age and your health. So some key questions would be, if you could capture 9 to 10% of all the up markets only, and the down markets didn't affect you. And by the way, these caps are much higher today. We're talking right now in the end of 2023, and cap rates are 14, 15, 16%. And by the way, they're uncapped strategies. There are strategies that pay 180% of the participation in the market. There's gains out there to be had way above 9 to 10. But what if you could lock in those gains every single year? You were guaranteed by some of the oldest, largest insurance companies in the United States and throughout the world. And it all grew tax deferred. IRC Section 72E of the tax code. And you could access it tax free. 72E and 5C of the tax code. What if you could get the gains of the market, never participate in the losses, grow your money tax-free, access it tax-free, and pass it on tax-free? Would you want to do that? You have ready access to the cash. If you could have all of that, what percentage of your low to moderate risk portfolio and annual savings would you allocate to such an asset class? And I can assure you that most of you are transferring money out of your life currently, unknowingly and unnecessarily. And we can help you to find that money and then show you how to reroute it into an asset such as this. Now, I can tell you that this doesn't work for everybody, but for many people it does. And just because you think you might be too old or too young, whatever the case may be, you might be surprised to find out that it might work for you. But you'll never know until you find out. Now, to really find out, I want to encourage you to continue your education. So I've put together a new mini course on life insurance. And if you check in the section below on life insurance for a more in-depth overview, you can go out there to minimal cost to go buy this program and actually go watch it, and then set up a time to meet. Let us sit down and show you how to grow your money tax-free, how to access up to 85% of your money at any time tax-free, how to put it back if you want, how to get most of the gains of the market, never participate in losses, and when you die, pass it on tax-free. And there's so much more to this. If you're a high net worth individual, you'll be absolutely astonished at what we can do with life insurance. Remember to live like you're going to die tomorrow and plan like you're going to live forever, because you just might. I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Be sure to subscribe to the channel below. And please put in some comments. Tell us what you think about this idea. What is your take on life insurance as an asset class? Keep smiling, and we'll see you real soon.